Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Inside Games, the only gaming show brave enough to still shill for CD Projekt Red, but with no money, by the way. They're not paying us.
At least I can promise this episode won't be as shilly as last Cyberpunk episode, right?
I don't know if you're sure about that. These days, if you're not insulting something nonstop, you're basically shilling for it.
Okay, so how about this? All right. Cyberpunk 2077 is so bad that CD Projekt canceled their completely official, totally announced, was definitely going to come out, full standalone multiplayer Cyberpunk game.
Now we are journalisming. I love it. We're jisming all over this story.
That does seem to be the takeaway from a recent strategy update from the CD Projekt group. But real quick, disclosures are necessary here. So I am biased as shit towards CD Projekt. I mean, I like the company to begin with, but also my partner works for them. So there is money in my household that comes directly from sales of Cyberpunk. It's not coming into my bank account, but you know, she does order DoorDash sometimes. So
these words are all Lawrence's, and by the way, I'm not getting paid. My partner doesn't work for CD Projekt Red. I just like the video game. I'm sorry, everybody.
These are all my words too, so keep all that in mind, please.
Also, if you want Cyberpunk coverage with a negative bias, the market is covered on that one. That's everywhere. So go ahead and click on that anywhere else.
All right, news time. Let's get into it. In the Q&A session of a surprisingly transparent corporate strategy update, CD Projekt President and Joint CEO Adam Kaczynski announced that CD Projekt is, quote, not working on releasing the next game as a big online experience.
This seems like an outright contradiction of his comments from an investor call in November 2020, that was before Cyberpunk came out, when he described the multiplayer component of Cyberpunk as, quote, a separate dedicated production, a big production, and we think about it as a standalone product, end quote.
So the math here is simple, right? A plus B equals cancel game. Bad game, CDPR in the shitter, they're gonna... Well, obviously, that's what a lot of outlets are saying. It's the easy headline to run.
Yeah, if you just wanted the headline, I guess that's where the story would end. It certainly leans into the narrative that Cyberpunk was so bad that it sent shockwaves through CDPR and forced them to reconsider tons of stuff.
Yeah, but in the same update, CDPR rededicated to releasing both free DLC and paid expansions, you know, like Hearts of Stone or Blood and Wine. So they're still dedicated to patching Cyberpunk and releasing the content they had already announced.
Not to mention they alluded to this exact strategy update back in Q3 2020. So all of this is kind of in line with plans.
It actually turns out there's way more context to these comments than Cyberpunk multiplayer canceled really conveys. So let's dig into the meat and figure out what's going on, and most importantly, what this actually means for the future of Cyberpunk and CD Projekt Red's games in general.
First of all, multiplayer for Cyberpunk isn't canceled. They're just shifting strategy to not release the experience as a standalone product, but the experience itself doesn't sound like it's intended to change much.
During the Q&A session, someone posited that shifting away from a self-contained release would mean a less ambitious multiplayer attempt, which is, you know, it's a reasonable thing to assume.
Project President Adam Kaczynski refuted the idea, saying, quote, we are not less ambitious in terms of online, it's just a different way of getting there. More step-by-step and less like releasing single-player games. We are reorganizing things around this as well. We have a new approach. We have online and services unit, which consists of CD Projekt Red and partly also GOG, and online development will occur in this unit. We continue to work on this project just with a different approach, step by step. Our ambitions aren't changing.
So if you take Kaczynski's statements at face value, theoretically, we'll be getting the same scale Cyberpunk multiplayer game, just integrated bit by bit versus having to drop $60 on whatever it ends up being.
Then again, this is the same Kaczynski that said it would be a standalone product 6 months ago.
And this is where the shilling part comes in if you want to think about it that way, but Kaczynski probably definitely didn't mean to announce anything back when he said it in 2020.
And really, when you go back and read what he said again, it doesn't substantially deviate from anything they said in their recent strategy update either.
The comment in question, the one that set all of this up, came later in the presentation when Kaczynski fielded a question from chat asking, quote, could you tell us what your plans are for the multiplayer mode?
For the sake of full context, we'll read the quote in full here. So Kaczynski responded, quote, so first, we don't call it modes. It's a separate dedicated production, a big production, and we think about it as a standalone product. Obviously, it's not entirely standalone as it comes from the universe of Cyberpunk, and it's very much related to the concept of single-player Cyberpunk I came up with. But from our perspective, is another independent production, an independent team of people works on it. And I said already, we are not focusing right now on talking too much about other future products that are to be released after Cyberpunk. So please be with us in the first quarter of next year when we plan to share some strategy update. And I believe Cyberpunk multiplayer will be possible.
Kaczynski said they think about it as a standalone product. He didn't say they were planning or intended to release it as one, but Cyberpunk gets crazy clicks, so, it's not surprising that there were a lot of Cyberpunk multiplayer will be a standalone game headlines. And, it's a reasonable connection to make, but technically not what was said.
We may be reading into this a little too much, but you can almost see the exact second when Kaczynski realizes he's saying too much and goes back to referencing the future strategy update that we just saw.
Kaczynski actually did a really great job dodging that particular question earlier in that same presentation in Q3 2020 when somebody asked about Cyberpunk multiplayer. Kaczynski responded, quote, "We'll share our thoughts about that next year when we update our strategy. It will happen in Q1 next year, and that will be after releasing Cyberpunk, and that will be the right moment to discuss deeper all key aspects around future releases."
Now, neither of us have met Adam Kaczynski, nor were we in the room to judge a tone, but it really sounds like he was just really excited. I get the feeling that all of CDPR was very excited about this game before it came out. Like, they were really excited about for all the public to see it and all this other stuff. And Kaczynski just couldn't help but drop some info about what his teams were working on back in November before the game came out.
But, when you're the president of a company working on a game that, at the time, the entire world was waiting for, two simple words, standalone product, can lead to an entire news cycle that you later have to correct or reiterate, recommunicate.
Yeah, CD Projekt has put their hands on that stove a few times already. They even explicitly acknowledge their propensity for announcing projects way too early in this current strategy update too.
Board member, I'm trying my best here, Piotr Nilibowicz hit the nail on the head saying, quote, "We have definitely learned from the Cyberpunk launch. Among those lessons is that projects shouldn't be announced and promoted too early, and that we shouldn't build expectations before we are ready. For future releases, we plan later initiation of marketing campaigns, and we also prefer to discuss upcoming projects in annual cycles."
From our perspective, the entire concept that Cyberpunk multiplayer would be a $60 game is kind of a stretch, given what was actually said, but certainly anyone could be forgiven for thinking that.
On to the really interesting question, what will Cyberpunk multiplayer actually look like?
Unfortunately for us, this time CD Projekt's board actually stuck to their guns, good for them, when it came to not discussing or leaking anything early.
Yeah, the only thing we have to go on, again, Adam Kaczynski did say something. It's more philosophical than concrete, though. Quote, "Talking about designs of our online ideas, well, the only thing we can share is that we have a new strategy, but we're not revealing in detail how we want to enrich our single-player games. Of course, we do have strong ideas and prototypes. Actually, we began work on online components over 2 years ago, and we're continuing. The only change is that we continue to work on it not as a main production line, but as a supporting production line, together with our single-player productions. Still, we believe our ideas will prove very exciting for gamers as an extra experience in our world, enriching our single-player games."
I don't know about you, my skin really starts to crawl when I hear about multiplayer enriching a single-player game.
Yeah, I don't like that phrase at all. I don't want my single-player game enriched. It was already enriched enough.
Ah, yes. Electronic Arts notoriously mandated multiplayer in all their single-player games, leading to awkward executions like 2013's Dead Space 3, a co-op game whose core mechanics shifted around entirely to allow for multiplayer and microtransactions.
It wasn't all bad. I mean, multiplayer modes also sprung up in other traditionally single-player games, like Mass Effect 3 and Dragon Age Inquisition from BioWare, although I'll say those multiplayer modes were not awful. They were okay. They did just kind of live alongside single player, though. They weren't stamped on top of it like Dead Space 3, which is where the enriching and integrating thing starts to become a little antsy.
Is this what we have to look forward to? A single-player RPG with some kind of annoying side mode that exists in a money trap for whales?
Once upon a time, we could simply say that's not the CD Projekt way and leave it at that. But the release of Cyberpunk 2077 has shaken a lot of people's faith in the company, so we're not going to throw that out there as a meaningful statement right now.
It's extremely easy to make comparisons to GTA Online here, especially with the way that CDPR is talking about extending their multiplayer functions across their entire catalog.
Yeah, that's like empire building stuff. Red Dead Online has to share a lot of the same tech that GTA Online does. It's nearly the same implementation. And you could bet your ass that Rockstar is going to put in a similar multiplayer mode into whatever they're working on currently, which a lot of people understand is Grand Theft Auto 6.
Why, Lawrence?
Because it makes ass loads of money. Holy crap.
Take-Two has never announced revenue numbers for GTA Online, but GTA 5, the game itself, has sold 135 million copies so far.
So here's maybe a point of comparison. So GTA 5 is an amazing game, don't get me wrong. One of the best single-player experiences. But 135 million is just unheard of for strictly single-player games.
Yeah, maybe the closest point of comparison here would be The Sims, which is kind of sort of single player, but it sold 200 million units across the entire series.
We think it's fair to say that GTA Online is what kept the sales of this game healthy, not to mention keeping it updated and released across 3 console generations.
So when it comes to CDPR building out multiplayer services that they intend to integrate across multiple games, Rockstar's approach seems like the closest here. However, there is one small detail that differentiates CDPR's approach here. They describe multiplayer as integrating with single player bit by bit over time.
Yeah, GTA Online it's a separate walled-off mode that doesn't really cross over with a single player at all. Same story for Red Dead Online.
And so maybe CDPR was trying to create their own Cyberpunk Online using the single player assets and decided to change course to something more integrated. I think it's totally valid after the release of the game.
It's fun to think about, presuming whatever it is actually works when it comes out.
Let me just speculate for a moment, Lawrence, with you. I do think that their strategy changed after the release of Cyberpunk, because I'm sure that sent shockwaves through the company. I don't know how much the strategy changed. I don't know if the strategy changed from a, like I said, a standalone to an online component of Cyberpunk, but I'm pretty sure things changed after Cyberpunk. And that's okay. I think it's all right for us to assume that they were like, well, we might be able to release a entirely multiplayer game or whatever from Cyberpunk because it's so successful. And again, this is before the game came out. Now the game was successful, but the messaging around it has changed. So I do think things changed, but I don't think they changed as much as people think. So from the sounds of it, we won't hear more about the Cyberpunk multiplayer until the year it hits, which at the very least will be next year, 2022.
Yeah, this year, what we have from CDPR is very clear, thankfully. We're getting Cyberpunk DLC. To be clear, that's the free DLC, not the expansions. So like hairstyles, cars, stuff like that. The next-gen Cyberpunk update, which actually hasn't come out yet for Series X and PS5, and the mobile game, The Witcher Monster Slayer.
This is all we know until we book flights to Poland, find the bar Adam Kaczynski goes to all the time, and buy him so much vodka, he tells us all about it. He does seem very excitable.
Thinking about Cyberpunk Online now, God, could you imagine a GTA Online where you could just pop your dick or tits out whenever you want?
That's the only thing that can save CDPR right now. That's the only thing, and I can't wait.